Você deve se lembrar de um vídeo, na verdade 2 vídeos que nós fizemos de um jogo do Robocop, que muita gente ficou em dúvida se ele era on rails, né, que é naquele estilo de você estar jogando e o próprio personagem vai virando a cabeça sozinho e você só tem que se preocupar em atirar, ou se ele era realmente um jogo em primeira pessoa. Pois bem, finalmente vamos poder ver mais desse jogo em um preview da IGN que nós vamos reagir aqui. E espero que vocês curtam já esse vídeo aí, deixe o seu gostei e no final deixe o seu comentário sobre o que você achou, beleza? Eu sou o Ariel, a gente vai junto, você está no... Vamos lá acompanhar esse vídeo a partir de agora, legendado em português lá do canal da IGN. Lembrando que o Alepitecus não tá comigo porque ele tá numa viagem, numa missão secreta. Vamos lá. Só relembrando o vídeo da IGN que nós estamos reagindo, tá? Tá no canal oficial deles.
Over 35 years since he first stomped the streets of Detroit, Robocop returns to the front lines.
Your move.
Vamos mudar aqui pra 4K.
Teon, the studio behind Terminator Resistance and Rambo the video game,
Ó, eles fizeram Rambo e o...
most ambitious 80s action movie revival yet.
E o
Set between the events of Robocop 2 and 3, with Peter Weller reprising his iconic role, Robocop Rogue City takes us back to old Detroit once again to clean up the streets, promising familiar faces, a huge helping of explosive violence, and the franchise's gloriously stilted cheesy humor.
Allowing dealers to steal from each other may result in less drugs on the street.
What? That would suck!
Rogue City is a bloody first-person shooter that takes us on an authentic trip to Alex Murphy's old haunts to chase a new threat.
O jogo é um jogo realmente em primeira pessoa, você pode se movimentar normalmente.
Rogue City opens with a now familiar satirical news segment, which is interrupted by a gang of punky thugs dubbed the Torchheads. This band of criminals is heavily tied to Nuke, the highly addictive narcotic from Robocop 2, and they proceed to take the Channel 9 news team hostage. Enter Detroit's shiny Robocop and his partner, Agent Ann Lewis, who are called to quell the disturbance and hunt down the gang's leader. This being Robocop, restoring peace is done with little subtlety. Armed with his legendary Auto 9, Robocop trudges methodically through the building, popping enemy skulls with each well-aimed shot. Despite his slow, tank-like movement, I've never played an FPS with a protagonist as slow and deliberate as Robocop, and it took some time to adjust. He feels practically indestructible. He's so heavily armored he doesn't need to hide behind cover. He just soaks up bullets like a sponge. And if he runs low on ammo, no problem. Just walk up to the nearest criminal and punch a hole in his face. As such, Rogue City immediately makes you feel like a boss level.
Eu vou dar uma pausa aqui, vou comentando algumas coisas conforme eu vou assistindo, já aproveitando que como eu não tô com o Lê aqui, quando a gente tá assistindo junto, o pause é um problema, né, porque ele tá sincronizado lá com o mesmo vídeo que eu. Mas é interessante isso de um jogo em primeira pessoa, onde você tem um personagem lerdo, como o Robocop, mas isso não é um problema, porque ele tem uma proteção absurda e tudo mais. E pelo que ele vai dizer, inclusive agora, você se sente como o inimigo, como o grande boss, né, então isso pode ser um diferencial do jogo. Pode tornar ele fácil? Até que sim. Mas vamos ver o que mais eles têm para dizer.
Threat, and none of its early enemies really stood a chance against me on normal difficulty.
E olha essa mira também que mostra onde estão os inimigos.
Within seconds, and thanks to his scanning abilities, you can sweep and clear the surroundings with ease. While this combat loop was satisfying for a couple of hours, I do question the longevity of it all. Robocop will only get more powerful as the game progresses, and in the brief time I had with the demo, I didn't face a single enemy that posed a real threat. So where does the challenge come from? Hopefully that will become apparent when we spend more time with Rogue City.
Nossa, a inteligência artificial às vezes é meio besta, hein? Às vezes não é inteligente.
After a fiery first meeting with the Torchheads, I got a brief look at how Rogue City will tackle Robocop's other duties. Alongside fights to the death with the main gang, you take on investigative objectives to poke around for clues at crime scenes and make arrests. Robocop has no reservations about taking out hostile foes in one fell swoop, but some of Rogue City's side quests have him restoring order by more peaceful means. In one case, I could choose a non-threatening dialogue option to convince a suspect to part with valuable information about their whereabouts of a drug dealer, rather than making him cooperate. So violence isn't the only route you can take when chasing leads. In another side quest, my main contribution was simply carrying a drunk perp to a cell as a favor to another police officer. Furthermore, public trust is earned by interacting with Detroit's inhabitants, and there's a skill tree option that allows you to open up new dialogue choices to aid in your investigations. Detroit itself feels like a city in distress. The disheveled buildings and grimy streets are ripped straight from the movies, and the delinquents that lurk on street street corners are more than just set dressing. Listen closely enough and you'll pick up splinters of conversations that, when you piece them together, may provide clues about where to lead the investigation next or open up new side objectives. Rogue City is built in Unreal Engine 5, and despite a few frame drops and glitches in the preview build I played, its gloomy alleyways and neon-soaked shop fronts look slick and detailed. Robocop himself looks fantastic too. Taeon has taken great care to recreating every grille and compartment on his suit, and the city lights gleam on his armor when you stop to talk to other characters, even if there are moments where the lighting doesn't quite hit right. Noticeable camera shake and the heavy thud of Robocop's footsteps made me feel like a hefty tank when I was stomping through the streets.
Place looks deserted. Are you sure your junkie friend didn't mix up the venue?
He is the type who likes to mix things up. We shall have to see.
Fans will...
Mano, parece ser um jogo muito diferente. Por mais que não seja uma cara de um jogo extremamente top, ele tem um visual muito bom em alguns momentos, em outros momentos parece mais simples, principalmente a questão de animações, né? Mas eu tô achando mó legal essa ideia de ter o personagem Robocop do jeito que o Robocop é, pesado, né? Difícil de se movimentar. Parece ser um diferencial do jogo, né? Que vai trazer um gameplay, pelo menos, que possa lembrar mais o que é ser um jogo de Robocop do que um jogo de tiro genérico, né? Vamos continuar.
Will immediately recognize other returning characters like Anne Lewis, but the majority of character models aren't anywhere near as realistic as Robocop's. The Torchheads have a selection of different hairstyles and outfits to differentiate them, but you won't be paying much attention to their attire when you're caught in a firefight anyway. This rogue city is a grubby and authentic step into Paul Verhoeven's dystopian Detroit, and it springs to life on your patrols. Between quests, you can use RoboVision to scan for nearby misdemeanors like traffic violations and disorderly conduct to ensure you clean up every nook and cranny of the city as you go.
You know what? If you really think you'll find
olha o
evidence
movimento
of
da
that
boca.
SUX ever being here, then be my guest.
Although Robocop is still bound by his prime directives, I enjoyed the few occasions I was able to work around them to suit the kind of Robocop I wanted to be. One side quest had me handling complaints at the police station, where I had the chance to decide whether to side with the individual or issue a ticket. In situations where things can turn violent, players will sometimes have the option to take a pacifist approach. There's certainly room for empathy in your interactions with the people in Detroit, and keeping them happy will increase your public trust score. Nonetheless, in the few investigations I've conducted so far, I was still met with plenty of opportunities to exercise Robocop's silly humor, and sometimes that means being a little heavy-handed. For example, during one quest, I had the chance to utter a stiff one-liner before smashing up someone's radio because it was too loud. Was this unnecessary? Definitely, but justice was served.
You need to be taught some manners.
Robocop starts with a few base abilities, including night vision, a shockwave that mimics a flashbang, and the option to temporarily slow down time to clear a room quicker. Aiming down sights scans the surroundings to highlight nearby enemies to make them easier to spot, and he can also move faster, shifting from a slow, deliberate stomp to a heavy, brisk walk. Additionally, these abilities can be upgraded to improve their effectiveness and in some cases, turn them lethal. For example, continuing to invest points in the combat branch of the skill tree eventually buffs Robo's shockwave to instantly kill enemies, whereas sticking with armor upgrades his suit so it deflects bullets to damage enemies. Robocop's potent primary weapon, the Auto 9, has its own tab of upgrades that are unlocked throughout the game's 20 to 30 hour campaign, but I didn't get to see any of these enhancements in action. Players can also pick up firearms dropped by the city's lawbreakers and use them for a limited time. However, I typically stuck with the Auto 9 due to its reliability and unlimited ammo. There are also exploding barrels, hefty CRT monitors, and more to fling around Rogue City's destructible environments, all of which work well as makeshift grenades. I only encountered human enemies during the demo, a couple of whom wore helmets for extra protection, and some that carried exploding barrels, but more recognizable enemies, including ED-209 who featured in the trailer, won't appear until later in the game. There's no escaping Robocop's trigger-happy approach, and nor would you want to, but ultimately he's still a police officer instated to uphold the law. As such, there are several skills that build on Robo's eagle eye and lightning speed processing powers, which come in handy when you're searching for clues. Some objects, and indeed people, can be scanned to get more information during an investigation. There are also instances where you need to pause and collect a specific number of clues to analyze crime scenes. This is where Robo's deduction and engineering skills shine. Deduction provides enhanced scanning abilities, which help you detect more useful information such as safe combinations. Then, if you've leveled up your engineering skills enough, you can crack open the safes themselves. Arguably, the most interesting side of Robocop is his psychology branch, which leans into the game's choice system. Investing enough in the skills doubles your public trust points and later lets you predict the consequences of certain dialogue choices. According to the developer, the decisions you make throughout the game will impact Rogue City's ending, although we're not sure to what extent just yet. Rogue City's game director says that some choices will determine which side characters live or die, but we'll have to wait to see how much of an impact this has on the story. Your choices also have consequences that may surface sooner than that. These can be almost immediate, such as coaxing out information that provides a lead in a case, to more subtle ripples later on. For example, letting a kid off with a warning for graffitiing may lead to you getting a favorable mention scrawled on a city wall down the line, opposed to something hostile. One thing that Rogue City doesn't shy away from is Robocop's flashbacks to his life as Alex Murphy. This surfaces almost immediately as an ongoing malfunction, and it's something OCP is eager to fix. This side of Robocop is clumsily handled in the movies and never truly reaches a satisfying resolution by the end of the second film, but the game's developer assured me that this will be an important part of Rogue City's story. Combined with the dialogue options and decisions players can make, I'm keen to see how Teon dives into the lingering human fragments in Robocop's memories, and whether they'll have a more meaningful impact on the story this time around. Overall, Rogue City has the makings of a faithful homecoming for Robocop fans. The demo immediately nails the franchise's exaggerated badass tone, and it's pumped to the gills with humor, violence, and all of the movie's callbacks you'd hope for. However, I'm curious to see how Teon plans to maintain Robocop's momentum to keep combat feeling fresh and introduce more of a challenge as players unlock new abilities and upgrades. I've only played through Rogue City's opening missions and didn't have a chance to test the game on different difficulties, but I was a bit disappointed that I didn't get to see a wider variety of enemies, or face a real threat that forced me to use Robocop's full set of tools. While some of Robocop's abilities sound promising, it's difficult to predict how much of an impact they'll have on the game's combat loop without trying them against tougher enemies. After recently watching the movies, I was excited to step into the shoes of a powerful action hero and tear through Detroit. Robocop certainly feels capable of doing so, but I'm concerned that simply bulldozing through enemies will lose its appeal quickly. I'm also intrigued by the idea of seeing more of Robocop's interactions with other police officers and the public, but as of now, it's too early to be sure how deep Rogue City's choice system really goes. For more on Robocop Rogue City, check out the latest trailer and for
Vamos deixar aqui girando enquanto a gente troca uma ideia. Gostei do que eles apresentaram aí. É um jogo que eu acho que as preocupações dele com relação à dificuldade devem acabar depois que a gente encontrar os inimigos mais fortes, mas só em alguns momentos, a maior parte das vezes deve ser uma parada meio de Robocop contra humanos, e os humanos sempre vão perder, porque o Robocop ele é muito poderoso pra eles, né? E eu acho que essa questão também dos inimigos se repetirem demais, aí eu acho que é uma questão de limitação do próprio estúdio, né? Eu não acho que eles vão conseguir melhorar esse aspecto, por mais que eles só tenham jogado o início e tudo, não parece uma coisa que eles vão conseguir dar conta. Eu acho que não vai ser um jogo incrível, mas eu acho que pra quem é fã de Robocop, pra quem gosta de Robocop, pelo menos um pouquinho, e ele, querendo ou não, é um personagem muito clássico, que até teve agora recentemente algumas novas coisas relacionadas a ele, como no Mortal Kombat 11, onde ele é um personagem de DLC, e se eu não me engano ele esteve em outros jogos, até como Fortnite, não tenho certeza. Muitos podem ter passado a conhecer Robocop e podem se interessar por essa história. E esse jogo, ele vai se passar entre o Robocop 2 e 3, então ele é como se fosse um Robocop 2,5. Então pra quem gostava dos filmes, vai ser uma história a mais aí, uma coisa legal, que eles podem ir muito além, tá ligado? Então, pô, eu não tô hypado, meu Deus, como eu estou interessado em jogar este Robocop. Mas eu quero jogar, eu quero experimentar, eu quero ver como é que é a ideia desse estúdio que começou muito mal ali com o Rambo, depois, apesar que eles devem ter lançado coisas antes também, mas depois foi pro Terminator, Exterminador do Futuro, que quem jogou fala bem, quem não jogou acha que é um jogo ruim, eu não joguei ainda e acho que é um jogo ruim, um dia ainda vou experimentar. Sou mais fã de Exterminador do Futuro do que de Robocop, mas por algum motivo não pude jogar, geralmente por causa de review, né? Não pude jogar o do Exterminador do Futuro, mas tô ficando interessado em jogar. E agora temos o do Robocop, que eu acho que vai acabar sendo um ponto de virada pra esse estúdio. Tá me parecendo ter uma qualidade aí. E uma coisa que eu gostei muito, é o que vocês estão vendo agora, é o gunplay, o jeito com que a arma atira, o jeito com que o tiro pega no inimigo. Tudo isso parece ser bem legal, mas os caras parecem ser bem burrinhos. Eles ficam na frente do tiro, não se escondem, né? Tudo isso conta demais na hora da dificuldade também. Comentem o que vocês acharam aí do Robocop Rogue City, que é um jogo que está sendo feito pela Teon. Não tenho certeza se tem data de lançamento já, Eu vou até procurar ver aqui pelo próprio vídeo da IGN, que deve ter alguma informação aqui, ó. Sai em setembro desse ano. PlayStation 5, Xbox Series X, S e PC. Então em setembro desse ano a gente já vai ter como jogar. Tá muito próximo. Então comentem o que vocês têm a dizer e a gente se vê no próximo vídeo. Não esqueça de interagir e deixar o seu gostei, compartilhar o vídeo e também de se inscrever no canal. Valeu!